Near the center of the Philippines, there is this island called Sabian Island. It has rich biodiversity and culture, and as well, it was the site where the Princess of the Stars was towed out to when it was flipped over. Today, I want to take you through the story of the Princess of the Stars, one of the most famous Philippine ferries right behind the Doña Paz. So, let's get into it. Princess of the Stars was built as MV Ferry Lac for Shin-Nishi Ferries. The company already had a history of building big express liners to sail the open waters of Japan. She had 3 cargo decks and room for about 1,000 passengers. It was later upgraded to 1,500. She was one of the biggest in the fleet and was powered by 2 Mitsubishi marine engines. Her gross registered tons was 23,824. She had a length of 193 meters, a beam of 28 meters, a height of 43, and 8 decks, making her one of the biggest ferries in Japan. Before we continue, I want to remind you guys to please subscribe. This video has been a big undertaking for me, and it's been extremely hard, so please subscribe. Anyway, back to the video. Her main route was from Okinawa to Tokyo and vice versa, of course. Occasionally, however, she would be taken off the route. In 2004, the ship was getting increasingly old, and so she was sold to Sulpicia Lines. In fact, by this time, as a ferry in Japan, she actually had a bow visor, but during her refit in the Philippines, the bow visor was painted over and sealed. She arrived at the Philippines on the 21st of August 2004, and Sulpicia Lines immediately began work on her interiors first, then they would do the exterior. Sulpicia Lines was one of the largest Philippine ferry companies in history, and it also had some of the largest, with the Princess of the Orient, Princess of the Universe, and now they'd be getting Princess of the Stars, their new flagship. Sulpicia Lines was founded in the 1980s by Don Sulpicio, and they also owned the infamous Doña Paz. Sound familiar? Well, it should. Some notable sites on the Princess of the Stars were a luxurious promenade, a theater, nice cabins, and also a pool, a feature many ships did not have at the time. Well, at least Philippine ferries. Even her economy classes were very luxurious, which is kind of what Sulpicia Lines was known for prior to the sinking. She was the largest ship in all of the Philippines. This video here was taken 2 weeks before the sinking of the ill-fated ship. Another thing on board was a playground. After 4 years of sailing incident-free and earning her title as the flagship of Sulpicia Lines, the time had came. On June 21st, 2008, the Princess of the Stars, loaded with around 1,000 passengers, was getting ready to depart. It was very busy, and the weather was rainy. You know, with the incoming typhoon. Despite this, many people still booked tickets on there because it was nearing summer. Despite the repeated warnings from the Coast Guard, and the fact that there was a typhoon nearby, the Princess of the Stars was granted permission to leave the port under belief she would sail on the outer edges of the storm. If this was true, she would have actually been able to ride out the storm. Some research shows that if there was no storm, people probably would not be as afraid, and therefore the ship would have been loaded with way more people. It also probably wouldn't have sank. The Philippines Coast Guard advised the Princess of the Stars to seek shelter shortly after its departure from Manila. However, the captain was confident in his ship. Looking out on the horizon, he could not see anything, and it looked like the coast was clear, so he made the decision to keep on going to Cebu. Everyone in the Princess of the Stars was having fun enjoying the luxurious accommodations, although obviously the pool was off limits for this voyage. Everyone loved the Princess of the Stars, but they probably had no idea what they were in for. And I can't imagine what it must have been like to see land for the last time, not knowing for some people this would be their last time seeing land. Although the bumpy ride was uncomfortable, many people were still distracted from the luxurious accommodations of the Princess of the Stars. The captain is now forced with the decision: continue on the route to Cebu or alter course like they're supposed to, and just take whatever port is nearest. The captain decided to continue on to Cebu. Eventually, it was beginning to get hard to walk, and everyone was beginning to panic. The ship was now falling into madness, with many people panicking, but the crew trying to assure them there was nothing to panic about. The captain, however, knew there was something to panic about, and that was capsize. If the ship capsized, it would be very likely not a lot of people would survive. Some were crowded on the open decks to try to jump off, and other crew were seen preparing life rafts and not caring about the passengers. However, when the captain altered course, the ship took its final plunge. And now, the ship had been turned upside down. At first, the Philippine Coast Guard was skeptical about sending out a rescue team because of the high storms, but once the storm moved toward Malaysia, they could finally begin searching for survivors. When a boat was sent out and picked up a couple survivors, it also found the ship. They thought it had a hole in the side, but this was actually proven to be the side thrusters. Those who did manage to get into lifeboats did not know if they actually would be saved or not. Some passengers ended up drifting as far as Queenston. The event was highly publicized, as it was really ironic how Sulpicia Line's ship had flipped over again, and after a little while of drifting, the superstructure of the underwater Princess of the Stars had grounded near Sibuyan Island for good. As soon as it was known that a ship had flipped over in the Philippines and there was heavy casualties, the nearby US ships came to assist, and the United States was willing to send in aid. Everyone wanted to know what had happened to their loved ones. Some even said, "We know they're dead, but show us the bodies." The same was also said when the Doña Paz blew up and sank. In fact, no one knew what had happened yet because it was too early to tell and the rescue operations were still going on. Apparently, the director of Sulpicia Lines had nothing to do with the disaster, and it was actually the president that might have been to blame. The president was the one that gave permission for the ship to leave port. However, people say it was an accident caused by human error because no one could have predicted what would happen when the storm came. Many people say it was both the Coast Guard and the president's fault. However, the captain actually denied the demand to return to port after he was told to take shelter. Today, no one knows who actually sank the Princess of the Stars, and it's still a heated dispute. In fact, the regulations set for the Philippine shipping industry after the disaster were so laid back that only a year later, another ship, the Super Ferry 9, would sink. Details are scarce as to what happened when the Princess of the Stars was being salvaged. However, from what I understand, it was flipped over somehow. The superstructure was scrapped, and then it was towed to China for final dismantling. A sad end to the biggest Philippine ferry ever. The line would end up having to switch to cargo and rebrand itself, as well as scrap almost all of its ferries. However, today you can experience one. The Princess of the Earth is now the TransAsia 10. It is the last remaining Sulpicia liner, and eventually, like all the others, it will go. In the future, if I'm ever on it, I'll do a tour of it. In conclusion, the Princess of the Stars is probably one of the most famous and recognizable Philippine ferry sinkings ever. She is also the biggest and most luxurious ferry that ever sailed in the Philippines. Without her, the Philippine ferry industry would not be what it is today. The Princess of the Stars will be remembered as the ship that was turned upside down.
Darkness, darkness, be my pillow. Take my hand and let me sleep in the coolness of your shadow, in the silence of your deep. Darkness, darkness, hide my yearning for the things that cannot be. Keep my mind from constant turning toward the things that cannot see. Darkness, darkness, long and lonesome, with the day that brings my happiness. I have found the edge of silence. Oh, I am in depths of fear. Darkness, darkness.